The day started quietly, almost too quietly for the kind of mission they were about to undertake. The SEAL team sat in the briefing room, their faces serious, eyes focused, and hands steady. Though inside, each of them felt the tension crawling up their spines. This was not just another operation. It was one of the most dangerous missions they had ever been assigned. Intelligence had come in about a high-value target hiding deep in a mountain range, a place known for its treacherous terrain and enemy fighters who knew every rock, every path, and every shadow. The team knew that getting in and out safely would not be easy. Failure could mean capture, injury, or even death. The team leader, a seasoned SEAL with years of combat experience etched on his face, stood at the head of the table. He went over the mission details with calm authority, explaining the objective, the target's last known location, and the expected enemy presence. Every word was precise, leaving no room for doubt or confusion. The rest of the team listened intently, memorizing every instruction, every route, every fallback plan. They knew that in situations like this, hesitation could be fatal. As the briefing ended, the SEALs began preparing their gear. Their equipment was laid out meticulously. Rifles, sidearms, knives, communications devices, night vision goggles, and survival kits. Each piece of equipment was checked and double-checked. They cleaned their weapons, ensuring that every part functioned perfectly, because even a single malfunction could endanger the entire mission. The sound of clicking rifles and snapping gear was oddly comforting in its familiarity. It reminded them that, despite the danger, they were ready. Outside, the wind howled across the base, carrying with it the chill of the high mountains where the mission would take place. The team packed into transport vehicles that would take them as close to the target as possible before they would have to move on foot. The ride was tense but silent. No one spoke. Everyone was mentally running through scenarios, imagining every possible twist the mission could take. Each SEAL had been trained for countless emergencies, yet the unpredictability of real combat always brought a rush of adrenaline that could not be simulated. As they neared the drop-off point, the landscape began to change. Rolling hills gave way to jagged cliffs, rocky ridges, and narrow valleys. The mountains seemed alive, as if they were watching, waiting for intruders. It was easy to see why the enemy preferred this terrain. The rocks provided cover, the elevation gave advantage, and the harsh conditions kept outsiders away. The SEALs moved cautiously, scanning every crevice, listening for the faintest sound that might indicate danger. Every crunch of gravel underfoot made hearts skip a beat. Every shadow seemed to shift with hidden intent. The leader signaled the team to stop for a final check. Radios were tested, positions confirmed, and a mental countdown began. Each SEAL looked at the others briefly, seeing the same combination of fear and determination mirrored back. They knew that once they crossed a certain line, there would be no turning back. There would be no pause, no retreat, only the mission and each other. Finally, they began the climb into the mountains. Each step was careful and deliberate. They used ropes to descend cliffs, crawled through narrow passages, and avoided making unnecessary noise. The team was a single organism, moving as one, relying on the silent communication of hand signals and eye contact. Every movement was calculated, every breath measured, because the slightest mistake could give away their position. As they approached the first vantage point near the target area, the team paused to observe. From this high ground, they could see the valley below, where the enemy could be lurking. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting long shadows that twisted the landscape into shapes that could easily fool the eye. The SEALs kept low, studying the terrain, mentally mapping escape routes, and identifying potential threats. It was a moment of stillness that felt as tense as battle itself. Inside each SEAL's mind, memories of past missions flashed. The ones where things went wrong, the ones where split-second decisions had saved lives. The mountains were beautiful in their own way, but they were also unforgiving. One wrong step, one misjudged angle, and the mission could end in disaster. Yet, despite the fear, there was also a sense of purpose, a sense of unity. They were trained to face danger head-on, to move through the impossible and come out alive, and that belief gave them strength. As the final preparations were made, a quiet determination settled over the team. Weapons were slung into ready positions, radios went silent, and helmets were adjusted. They were ready to enter enemy territory, to move through the mountains, and to complete the mission no matter what lay ahead. It was the calm before the storm, a moment that would soon give way to chaos, but for now the SEALs were ready. Each one knew the risks, yet each one also knew that together, they could face anything. The mountains awaited, and so did the unknown challenges of the mission. But the SEALs were prepared to meet them, every step of the way. The SEAL team moved carefully, one step at a time, into the heart of the mountains. The terrain was unforgiving. Jagged rocks, narrow ledges, and steep cliffs made every movement dangerous. Even the most experienced among them had to pause often, testing each step before trusting it. A single misstep could mean a broken ankle or worse, a fall that no one could survive. The cold mountain air bit at their faces, and the wind howled like a living thing through the rocky crevices. Every gust seemed to carry a warning, reminding them that the enemy could be watching from anywhere, hidden in shadows or behind boulders. The team moved silently, communicating only with hand signals and subtle gestures. Words could give them away, and in these mountains, sound traveled far. They were trained to move like ghosts, invisible and silent, and now that training became their lifeline. Each SEAL knew the terrain in theory, but in reality, every corner held surprises. Loose stones that could tumble down, patches of ice that could send them sliding, and narrow pathways where one wrong move could trap them. Every nerve was on high alert, every sense sharpened to the maximum. As they climbed higher, the valley below seemed endless, stretching like a maze filled with dangers. Trees and rocks created natural hiding places for enemy forces, and the team had to constantly scan for any sign of movement. Even the smallest twitch of a branch or a shadow shifting unnaturally could signal danger. They were not just moving. They were observing, listening, and predicting, trying to stay one step ahead of an enemy who knew these mountains better than anyone else. The path became steeper, forcing the SEALs to use ropes and harnesses to climb cliffs. The team worked together seamlessly, helping each other over difficult spots, checking each other's gear, and maintaining formation. There was no room for ego here. The mountains demanded trust and teamwork. One weak link could endanger the entire team. Every time they paused, they took a deep breath, checked their surroundings, and prepared mentally for the next obstacle. The journey was exhausting, both physically and mentally, but they pushed forward, driven by duty and the knowledge that lives were at stake. Night began to fall, and with it came a deeper sense of danger. Darkness in the mountains was like a blanket hiding everything. Cliffs, rocks, enemy positions, nothing was visible until it was too late. The SEALs switched to night vision goggles, their world turning into shades of green and black. Every movement became slower, more deliberate, as they crept through the terrain. The silence was eerie. Occasionally, the distant sound of an animal moving or a rock falling would make their hearts race, but they stayed focused. In these moments, even a heartbeat seemed loud. The cold intensified as the night deepened. Frost formed on their clothing, and breath came out in clouds. Their fingers and toes began to stiffen, and simple movements required more effort. Yet they kept moving. There was no stopping. Stopping could mean freezing or being discovered by the enemy. They relied on layers of clothing, careful pacing, and constant vigilance to survive the brutal cold. Every SEAL was trained to endure hardship, but the mountains had a way of testing even the toughest soldiers. As they neared the target area, tension mounted. Every shadow, every sound made them tighten their grip on their weapons. The enemy could be anywhere, hidden on ridges above, in caves, or behind boulders below. The SEALs had to constantly assess their surroundings, thinking ahead, predicting where threats might appear. The mountains themselves seemed alive, with every rock and ridge potentially hiding an enemy fighter ready to strike. The team's training kicked in fully now. Scanning, covering, moving, all in perfect coordination. Despite the danger, there were moments of awe. The mountains were breathtaking, towering peaks, deep valleys, and rivers cutting through the terrain. But beauty in this place was deceptive. It could hide deadly traps. The SEALs had to admire the view only for a moment before returning their focus to the mission. Their minds had to stay sharp, always thinking ahead, always ready for the unexpected. Hours passed as they moved slowly, carefully, always alert. Fatigue set in, but no one showed it. Each SEAL pushed past exhaustion, drawing on mental strength, training, and sheer willpower. They knew that any mistake could cost lives. Each step brought them closer to danger, but also closer to completing their mission. By the time they reached a strategic vantage point, overlooking the valley where the enemy was expected, the team paused. They were physically exhausted, but mentally alert. From this high ground, they could observe without being seen, planning the next move carefully. Every detail mattered: wind direction, shadow patterns, potential hiding spots, escape routes. They were deep in enemy territory now, and the true challenge was about to begin. The mountains had tested them already, but the real danger, the enemy, was waiting just ahead. The SEAL team had barely settled into their observation position when a sense of danger began to tighten like a noose around them. They had moved through the mountains carefully, every step measured, every shadow watched. Yet despite their vigilance, something was wrong. A sudden movement on a ridge caught the eye of one of the team members. At first, it seemed minor, just a flicker of a branch or a shadow shifting in the wind, but their training made them instinctively alert. In these mountains, even the smallest detail could signal a trap. Within seconds, the team realized they had walked straight into an ambush. The enemy was everywhere, hidden in positions they could barely see. Bullets began to fly, striking rocks and ricocheting dangerously close. The sound of gunfire echoed off the cliffs, making it impossible to tell where the shots were coming from at first. The SEALs immediately dropped to the ground, seeking cover behind boulders, rocks, and uneven terrain. The mountains, which had seemed so majestic and peaceful moments ago, had transformed into a deadly maze. The team's leader quickly assessed the situation. They were surrounded, completely outnumbered and exposed. He barked orders, his voice cutting through the chaos, as each SEAL moved to a defensive position. The team had trained for ambushes countless times, but training and reality were very different. The adrenaline surged, making every heartbeat loud and every thought sharp. They had to act fast or risk being pinned down or worse. Bullets zipped past them as they returned fire, each shot calculated, precise, and deliberate. The enemy had the advantage of high ground and cover, and the SEALs had to rely on tactics, teamwork, and instincts to survive. Communication was key. Hand signals, brief shouts, and eye contact ensured the team moved as one, covering each other, watching blind spots, and keeping track of every movement in the chaos. Every second mattered. Hesitation could be deadly. The mountains seemed to close in around them. Rocks and cliffs blocked easy escape routes, and the valley below offered no cover. Every potential path was under enemy fire. The SEALs had to constantly shift positions, moving quickly but carefully, crawling, diving, and sometimes rolling to avoid being hit. Their training in mountain warfare and ambush scenarios became crucial. Every movement was practiced instinctively, yet in real life, danger felt much closer, much more personal than anything in training. The team's medic stayed alert, ready to assist anyone who might get hit, while another member kept scanning for new threats. Each SEAL had multiple roles, balancing offensive and defensive actions simultaneously. They used the terrain to their advantage, ducking behind boulders, using ridges to block line of sight, and carefully timing their movements. Even in the midst of fire and chaos, their focus never wavered. They had a mission to complete, and survival depended on teamwork and precision. Despite the intense situation, the team remained disciplined. They assessed the enemy positions, calculated distances, and coordinated attacks. Every SEAL knew that panic was the enemy's ally, and staying calm under fire was their best weapon. Bullets continued to whiz past, but they held their ground, moving strategically and returning fire in controlled bursts. The mountains were no longer just obstacles. They were both protection and danger, forcing the SEALs to think creatively and adapt instantly. As the firefight continued, fatigue and fear tried to creep in, but they were pushed aside by determination and training. Every SEAL relied on muscle memory, instincts, and years of preparation. They covered each other, checked blind spots, and ensured no one was left exposed. Even in the chaos, there was a rhythm, a deadly dance of survival, precision, and coordination. The SEALs understood that they were in a life-or-death situation, and failure was not an option. Amid the chaos, they began to notice a pattern. The enemy seemed confident, but some positions were poorly coordinated. The SEALs' eyes and ears picked up subtle hints of weakness. A rustle in the wrong place, a shadow that didn't align with the others, an enemy taking too long to reload. Slowly, the team realized that this ambush, though deadly, had vulnerabilities. Recognizing them would be key to surviving and turning the tide. The mountains echoed with the sounds of gunfire, shouted commands, and the SEALs' movements. Rocks were chipped and dust rose into the night air, making visibility even more difficult. Yet, amid the chaos, there was an underlying sense of control. Each SEAL knew their role, and instinct guided their actions. Their training kicked in fully now. Every step, every shot, every decision was precise and purposeful. By the end of this first wave of the ambush, the SEALs had held their positions, taking casualties lightly but carefully, and had begun to turn the enemy's advantage into something they could exploit. They were surrounded, yes, but not defeated. The situation remained perilous, but the team's focus, bravery, and skill allowed them to stay alive and think ahead. What had begun as an overwhelming ambush was slowly being analyzed, understood, and prepared to be countered. The SEALs' shouts and gunfire echoed off the cliffs, but among them was a quiet, steely determination. They had entered the mountains ready for a mission, and now, even under fire, they were determined to survive and succeed. Every member knew the night would be long, the danger ever present, but their training, courage, and teamwork gave them hope. This was only the beginning, and the mountains held many more surprises yet to come. The initial shock of the ambush had passed, but the danger had not. The SEALs were still surrounded on all sides, and every second felt like an eternity. Bullets continued to strike rocks around them, sending fragments and dust into the air. The sound of gunfire echoed through the mountains, bouncing off cliffs and creating confusion. It was chaos, yet amidst it, the team had to remain calm and make quick, critical decisions. There was no room for panic. One wrong move could cost lives. The team leader immediately took command. His voice, sharp and steady, cut through the noise as he issued precise orders. "Form a defensive perimeter," he shouted, pointing to positions that offered the best cover. Every SEAL moved instinctively, diving behind boulders, positioning themselves strategically, and covering each other. They had trained for ambushes countless times, but this was real life, and the stakes were higher than ever. The fear was present, but it was controlled and channeled into focus. Communication became crucial. Radios were used sparingly to avoid giving away their positions, so hand signals and gestures were relied upon. Eyes darted constantly, scanning for enemy movements. Every sound, every shift of shadows, could signal a hidden threat. The mountains, beautiful in the daylight, now felt like an enemy themselves, hiding fighters who knew every rock, every ridge, every narrow passage. The SEALs had to think 3 steps ahead at all times. The team quickly assessed their situation. They were outnumbered, exposed, and far from backup. Reinforcements would take hours to reach them, and by then the enemy could be gone, or worse, the SEALs could be in serious trouble. They knew they could not rely on outside help. Survival depended entirely on their training, teamwork, and quick thinking. Every SEAL understood the risk, yet there was a quiet resolve among them. They were elite soldiers, and this was what they were trained for: facing the impossible and surviving. The team leader called for a regroup. They moved to better positions, using every rock and ridge for cover. They had to hold their ground while also preparing to counterattack if the opportunity arose. This required precise coordination. One SEAL would provide cover fire while another adjusted position, moving slowly and carefully, always aware of the danger around him. The process was exhausting, but every movement was critical. Survival depended on their ability to work as a single unit. Despite the chaos, the SEALs' training allowed them to think strategically. They scanned the mountains for weaknesses in the enemy's formation. Even in the confusion of gunfire, they began to notice patterns, enemy positions that were poorly coordinated, gaps in cover, and areas where their superior training could be used to advantage. Slowly, the team realized that what initially seemed like a deadly ambush had vulnerabilities that could be exploited. The mountains were not only a danger but also a tool. The SEALs used high ground, shadows, and natural barriers to create opportunities for counteraction. Every movement was calculated: when to fire, when to move, when to stay silent. They relied on each other completely, covering blind spots, watching each other's backs, and communicating silently through eye contact. Trust was absolute. Each SEAL's life depended on the other's skill and focus. The enemy continued to pressure them, attempting to force them into mistakes. But the SEALs held their positions with discipline and precision. Each shot was controlled, each movement deliberate. The mountains, once silent and foreboding, were now filled with the sounds of a calculated fight. Dust and rock fragments flew into the air, and the scent of gunpowder mixed with the cold mountain air. Every second was a battle of wits, reflexes, and endurance. As the firefight continued, fatigue began to weigh on the team. Muscles ached from climbing, holding positions, and moving under fire. Hearts pounded, adrenaline surged, and yet, each SEAL pushed through exhaustion. They reminded themselves that stopping or panicking was not an option. Their mission and their lives depended on persistence and focus. The team leader encouraged them quietly, giving short, motivational commands that reinforced their purpose. Amidst the chaos, small victories became apparent. They managed to hold certain positions, preventing the enemy from advancing. They had minimized casualties so far, and morale, though strained, remained intact. The SEALs knew they had to continue holding and observing, waiting for the right moment to exploit weaknesses. Every glance, every movement, every decision was critical. By the end of this phase, the team had stabilized. They were still surrounded, but now they had a plan. They had identified potential weaknesses in the enemy's formation, better positions for cover, and opportunities to turn the tide. The mountains, which had seemed to trap them, now offered a strategic advantage when used correctly. The SEALs were not just surviving. They were preparing to fight back intelligently, using skill, experience, and instinct to change the outcome. Even in the face of overwhelming odds, the team remained resolute. Fear was present, but it was tempered by discipline, courage, and trust in one another. They had weathered the initial storm of bullets and chaos and were now ready to turn defense into action. The mountains had tested them. The enemy had challenged them. But the SEALs were determined to survive, fight, and succeed, no matter what lay ahead. The firefight had reached a tense stalemate. The SEALs had held their positions, their training guiding every movement, but the enemy was still pressing hard. They were surrounded, outnumbered, and exhausted, and for a moment, it seemed like there was no way to turn the battle in their favor. Then, from a high ridge that no one had noticed before, a single shot rang out. It was precise, silent in a way that seemed impossible amidst the chaos. An enemy fighter dropped instantly, taken out with perfect accuracy. The team froze for a moment, trying to figure out what had just happened. Then another shot, and another, each one hitting its mark with deadly precision. The SEALs realized they were no longer alone in this fight. Someone, a sniper, hidden and unseen, had entered the battlefield. The shots came from the mountains above, from a place where the enemy could not reach easily, and every bullet disrupted the ambush, taking out key positions and sowing confusion. The SEALs exchanged glances, relief and awe washing over them. They had no idea who this mysterious shooter was, but he was changing everything. The sniper was almost supernatural in his skill. From the distance, he could pick off enemies without revealing his location. Each shot was deliberate and calculated. The enemy began to falter, their confidence shaken. They had thought the SEALs were the only threat, but this unseen presence was turning the tide. The SEALs quickly adapted their strategy, realizing that with the sniper covering them, they now had a chance to counterattack. They moved with renewed energy, taking advantage of the confusion among the enemy. As the battle unfolded, it became clear that this ghost sniper was not just skilled, but highly strategic. He seemed to know exactly which positions were most dangerous, which enemies posed the biggest threat, and which angles needed to be neutralized first. Every shot disrupted the enemy's plans, allowing the SEALs to reposition themselves, protect their wounded, and regain control of the situation. What had seemed like a hopeless ambush was suddenly becoming manageable, and the momentum was shifting in favor of the SEALs. The team leader observed the sniper's work with a mixture of amazement and respect. He had trained with some of the best marksmen in the world, but this skill was extraordinary. The sniper remained completely unseen, a shadow on the mountains, striking fear into the enemy without ever exposing himself. His presence was a force multiplier, giving the SEALs an advantage they desperately needed. The SEALs could now focus more on tactical movement rather than just survival, and slowly, they began to take back control of the battlefield. The enemy, on the other hand, grew increasingly frustrated and confused. They could not locate the sniper, could not predict his next shot, and were losing the initiative they had carefully planned. Communication among the enemy forces broke down as they tried to figure out what was happening. Some tried to advance only to be eliminated by unseen bullets. Others froze in fear, unsure of which direction to move. The mountains themselves seemed to work with the sniper, offering perfect vantage points and natural cover that made him almost untouchable. The SEALs used this opportunity to push forward strategically. They moved through cover, securing better positions and consolidating their defense. They began to target weak spots in the enemy's formation, now that the sniper had created openings. The team moved like a single organism, each member aware of their role and the support of the unseen sniper. Every movement was coordinated, deliberate, and deadly effective. They were no longer merely reacting. They were taking control of the battle. Despite the chaos, the SEALs noticed something remarkable. The sniper never missed, but he also never revealed his identity. He seemed to appear out of nowhere, act with perfect timing, and then vanish just as suddenly. The idea that someone so skilled was on their side, fighting silently and invisibly, added a psychological boost. Confidence returned to the team. Fear was replaced with determination, and every SEAL moved with a new sense of purpose. As the firefight continued, the sniper's impact became undeniable. Enemy positions that had once seemed untouchable were being neutralized, one by one. The ambush that had seemed so threatening was now collapsing under the precision of this unseen hero. The mountains, which had earlier trapped the SEALs, now offered them cover and opportunity, guided by the sniper's skill. The team realized that this ghostly figure was their lifeline, giving them a fighting chance in a situation that had seemed hopeless. By the end of this phase of the battle, the SEALs had regained much of their tactical advantage. They were still surrounded, still cautious, but the momentum had shifted. The sniper's skill had changed the course of the fight, and the SEALs knew that survival and mission success were now possible. While they had not seen their savior, they understood his impact. A single, mysterious marksman could turn the tide of an entire ambush. The team's spirits were lifted, and for the first time in hours, they felt hope. The mountains, once silent witnesses to danger, now seemed to echo with the presence of this mysterious hero. The SEALs moved forward with renewed focus, aware that the ghost sniper was watching, protecting, and shaping the battle. What had started as a deadly ambush was now a story of survival, skill, and the mysterious intervention of a sharpshooter whose identity no one knew, but whose impact was undeniable. The battle was far from over, but something had changed. The SEALs, once cornered and overwhelmed, now felt a surge of hope. The mysterious sniper above had shifted the balance of power. Enemy fighters who had been confident and aggressive were now faltering, unsure where the next precise shot would come from. The SEALs knew they could not waste this opportunity. They began to move carefully, taking advantage of the openings the ghost sniper created. Every step, every movement was measured, deliberate, and guided by strategy. The team leader quickly assessed the situation. They were still surrounded, but the enemy's focus was now split. Some were distracted by the sniper, while others tried to regroup, leaving their positions vulnerable. The SEALs used hand signals to communicate silently, coordinating movements with perfect precision. One member would cover a blind spot while another shifted to a better position. Every move was synchronized, practiced hundreds of times during training, yet now it was being tested in the harshest real-world conditions imaginable. The mountains, which had once seemed like a trap, became an ally. Rocky ridges, narrow ledges, and shadowed valleys were no longer obstacles alone. They offered cover, hiding places, and angles of attack. The SEALs knew these paths intimately, and now they used the terrain to confuse and outmaneuver the enemy. With the sniper's support, they began picking off enemy fighters who had overextended themselves or left gaps in their lines. The tide of the battle was slowly turning in their favor. Despite the progress, tension remained high. The SEALs were trained for endurance, but their muscles ached. Their hands were blistered from gripping weapons, and their hearts pounded from adrenaline. Each breath was heavy in the thin mountain air, and yet they pressed on, driven by focus, duty, and the unspoken bond of their team. They knew that every delay or mistake could give the enemy a chance to recover. Survival depended on their discipline and their ability to act quickly and decisively. The ghost sniper continued to strike with deadly accuracy. From a distance, unseen and almost impossible to trace, he neutralized key threats. The enemy was confused and terrified, unsure where the next bullet would come from. Some tried to take cover, others attempted to move, only to be eliminated with frightening precision. The SEALs watched from their positions, their morale soaring. They had been given a fighting chance, and they were determined to seize it fully. The SEALs now began to execute calculated counterattacks. They moved in small groups, using the sniper's cover to advance toward better positions and stronger vantage points. Each movement was synchronized with suppressive fire, calculated risks, and constant communication. The enemy's formation was breaking down, and the SEALs pressed the advantage. Every shot, every maneuver, every decision was the result of training meeting opportunity, a deadly dance of strategy and courage. Fatigue threatened to slow them down, but adrenaline and focus pushed them onward. They reminded themselves that the mission was not just about survival, it was about completing the objective and getting out alive. Every member relied on the others completely, trusting that each person would perform their role perfectly. Mistakes could cost lives, but confidence in teamwork kept their movements fluid and effective. The mountains, previously a silent and intimidating presence, now seemed like an ally. The SEALs used elevation to their advantage, positioning themselves to cover wide areas, predict enemy movements, and control key pathways. Every rock, ridge, and shadow was a potential asset, and they exploited it expertly. The combination of sniper support, tactical knowledge, and unwavering teamwork began to shift the momentum entirely. As the enemy began to retreat or reposition, the SEALs could finally push forward more aggressively. They were no longer just defending, they were taking the fight to the enemy. Their precision and coordination allowed them to neutralize the remaining threats systematically. Each step forward was hard-won but effective, and the SEALs moved with growing confidence, knowing the sniper above was still watching, still striking, and still supporting their mission. By the end of this phase, the battlefield had changed completely. What had started as a desperate fight to survive was now a carefully executed operation of skill, teamwork, and tactical advantage. The SEALs had regained control, and the ambush that had seemed overwhelming was collapsing. The sniper, unseen and almost mythical in presence, had become the key to this transformation, allowing the SEALs to move from defense to offense with precision and confidence. The team could feel the shift. Fear and uncertainty were replaced with determination and focus. Every member was aware of the risk, but now they also understood the power of strategy, coordination, and a little bit of mystery. The mountains, the chaos, and the enemy's earlier confidence had been turned against them. The SEALs were no longer cornered. They were advancing, methodically, decisively, and with the support of an unseen ally whose skill was beyond anything they had witnessed. The night air was filled with the sounds of calculated gunfire, careful movements, and the faint echoes of the enemy's retreat. Each SEAL moved like a part of a single organism, fluid, precise, and unstoppable. The ghost sniper had changed the rules of the battle, creating opportunities where none existed, and now the SEALs were capitalizing on them fully. The tide had turned, and victory, while still hard-won, was finally within reach. The SEAL team pressed forward, their focus sharp, every sense on high alert. The mountains had tested them, the enemy had tried to overwhelm them, and yet here they were, alive and steadily advancing toward the mission's objective. The earlier chaos had shifted into a calculated operation. The team moved with purpose, each SEAL covering the others, trusting that the mysterious sniper above was still watching, still striking, and still giving them the advantage they needed. The air was thick with tension, but also with determination. Every step brought them closer to completing what they had come to do. As they approached the target area, the enemy's resistance began to weaken. Confusion and fear had taken hold. Their once coordinated formation now scattered and disorganized. The ghost sniper had already neutralized key positions, creating gaps the SEALs could exploit. The team moved carefully but quickly, advancing behind cover, scanning for threats, and remaining ready for anything. Every shadow, every sound was treated as a potential danger. The mountains, though breathtaking in their height and beauty, were still filled with hidden risks. The target itself was well hidden, tucked deep into a rocky valley surrounded by natural barriers. It was the kind of location designed to frustrate even the most skilled forces, with narrow access points, high vantage points, and natural cover. Yet the SEALs had been trained for this, and now, with the enemy disoriented and the sniper supporting them, they could approach with a tactical advantage. The team leader signaled, and the SEALs moved into position, securing the perimeter and preparing to enter the objective zone. Every movement was deliberate, calculated to minimize exposure. The SEALs checked each other's positions, confirmed weapon readiness, and coordinated their entry. Time was critical, but haste could be deadly. They advanced with quiet precision, using hand signals and subtle gestures, communicating silently as they moved closer to the target. The mountains were still a threat, but the team had adapted, using every ridge, shadow, and rock to their advantage. They had turned a hostile environment into a controlled battlefield. As they entered the area, the SEALs encountered remaining enemy fighters, but the element of surprise and careful planning worked in their favor. Small, coordinated movements allowed them to neutralize threats efficiently. Each SEAL knew exactly what to do, where to move, and when to act. The training that had prepared them for countless scenarios now played out in real life, with life-or-death consequences. Despite the tension, their actions were fluid and precise, a testament to their skill and discipline. Inside the target area, the SEALs quickly secured the location. They neutralized remaining threats, collected necessary intelligence, and ensured that no enemy could regroup to counterattack. The team worked seamlessly, moving as one unit, their focus unwavering. The mountains, which had earlier been full of danger and unpredictability, now provided the cover and strategic advantage that allowed the SEALs to complete the mission. The mysterious sniper above continued to watch silently, unseen but undeniably impactful, ensuring that the team remained protected during the final stages of the operation. With the immediate threats neutralized, the team began a careful sweep of the area. They checked for hidden dangers, booby traps, and other hazards, ensuring that the zone was fully secure. Every SEAL contributed to the process, relying on both training and instinct. The operation demanded not only physical skill but also mental acuity. The team had to remain aware of everything around them, even after intense combat. Each moment was critical, and any lapse could be costly. The SEALs were physically exhausted, their muscles sore from hours of climbing, running, and fighting, but their adrenaline and focus carried them through. They moved methodically, covering each other, clearing the terrain, and ensuring the mission's success. The sense of accomplishment was tempered by the awareness that danger could still be present, but the team's discipline never faltered. They knew that every action mattered, and they remained alert until the area was completely secured. Finally, with the target secured and the enemy neutralized, the team paused for a brief moment to assess the situation. They were alive, intact, and had completed their mission despite incredible odds. The mountains, the ambush, the chaos, and the enemy had all tested them, but the SEALs had prevailed. They gathered quickly, communicating silently to confirm that the mission objectives had been met and that the team was ready for extraction. As they prepared to leave, the team couldn't help but reflect on the mysterious presence that had made such a difference. The ghost sniper had remained unseen throughout the operation, his identity unknown, but his skill had been undeniable. Every shot he had taken, every position he had controlled, had contributed to the SEALs' success. He had appeared when hope seemed thin and had given them the edge needed to complete the mission. The team understood that, without his intervention, the outcome could have been very different. The SEALs began their careful exit from the mountains, moving with the same precision that had carried them through the battle. Each step was calculated, every movement covered, and every risk assessed. The mission had been a success, but the team knew that vigilance was still required. The mountains could still hold hidden threats, and the extraction had to be executed perfectly to ensure everyone returned safely. By the end of this phase, the team had achieved what they came to do. The target was neutralized, the enemy defeated, and the SEALs had survived one of the most dangerous ambushes of their careers. They had relied on skill, training, teamwork, and a mysterious ally whose presence had been the difference between life and death. The mission was complete, but the story of the ghost sniper would remain a legend within the team, a reminder of how even in the most desperate circumstances, a single skilled presence could change the outcome entirely. The mission was complete, but the mountain still seemed alive with its secrets. The SEAL team had survived an ambush that would have overwhelmed most soldiers, and they had completed their objective with precision and courage. They moved carefully through the rugged terrain, their eyes scanning every shadow, every ridge, every crack in the rocks. Even though the immediate threat was gone, the mountains had taught them a hard lesson. Danger could hide in the quietest of places, and vigilance could never be lowered. As they prepared for extraction, a quiet awe settled over the team. The events of the past hours were still fresh in their minds. The chaos of the ambush, the bullets flying past, the sharp orders shouted over the roar of the mountains. They had fought with skill and determination, relying on each other for survival. But amid all of this, one presence had stood out above all: the ghost sniper. No one knew who he was, where he had come from, or even why he had intervened, but his impact had been undeniable. Every SEAL had seen the difference he made, taking out key enemy positions, protecting the team, and giving them the advantage they needed. The sniper's skill was almost unreal. He had struck without being seen, acted with perfect timing, and disappeared into the mountain shadows without a trace. Some of the team whispered in disbelief about how one person could make such a difference. Others shook their heads in quiet respect, acknowledging that they had witnessed something extraordinary. The ghost sniper had saved lives, turned the tide of the ambush, and ensured that the mission could be completed. Yet even now, his identity remained a mystery. As they moved toward the extraction point, the SEALs reflected on the lessons they had learned. Training, teamwork, and discipline had carried them through, but so had the element of the unexpected. In war, sometimes survival depended not only on skill and preparation but also on unpredictability and luck, or in this case, on a single, unseen ally who had appeared at the perfect moment. The mountains, harsh and unforgiving, had tested them in every possible way, but the ghost sniper had turned the challenge into an opportunity. The extraction helicopters appeared in the distance, their rotors cutting through the cold mountain air. The team signaled their position, moving carefully to avoid being exposed. Even in this final phase, every movement was deliberate, every decision critical. They knew that leaving the mountains safely was just as important as surviving the ambush. They climbed aboard, exhausted but victorious, and the mountains slowly disappeared behind them, vast and silent, as if they were swallowing the secrets of the battle and the ghostly figure who had changed its outcome. Back at base, the SEALs debriefed quietly. Every detail was recorded, every action analyzed. They spoke of the ambush, the strategies they used, and the risks they had taken. But no one could explain the sniper's identity. Questions went unanswered, and theories were exchanged. Some believed he was part of another covert unit. Others thought he might have been a local ally with extraordinary skill. Yet, whatever the truth, the ghost sniper had become a legend in their minds. A silent guardian who appeared when hope seemed lost. The team reflected on the personal impact as well. They had faced fear, exhaustion, and chaos, and yet they had persevered. Every SEAL knew the price of survival, and every life had been preserved thanks to skill, teamwork, and the mysterious intervention that had appeared at the critical moment. There was a sense of gratitude, respect, and quiet awe. The mountains had tested them, the enemy had challenged them, and the ghost sniper had saved them. The story of this mission would stay with them forever, a reminder of courage, precision, and the unknown forces that sometimes guide events in life or war. Even days later, the memory of the ambush remained vivid. The SEALs spoke quietly among themselves, recounting moments when a single shot from the sniper had changed the course of the battle, when careful coordination had saved a teammate, when instinct and training had kept them alive. The mission was complete, but its story had become legend, told again and again as a testament to bravery, skill, and the unseen hand that sometimes changes everything. The mountains remained silent, their secrets intact. The ghost sniper had vanished as mysteriously as he had appeared, leaving no trace behind. The team never learned his name and no one saw him again. Yet, every SEAL carried the memory, not just of survival, but of extraordinary skill and courage. He had become a symbol of hope, precision, and the unexpected hero who emerges when all seems lost. The mountains had tested them, the enemy had tried to destroy them, but the ghost sniper had ensured their victory. The legend of that mission spread quietly within the SEAL community. It was a story of perseverance, teamwork, and the unseen power of a single, extraordinary individual. It reminded the SEALs and anyone who would hear the tale that even in the most impossible situations, skill, courage, and a bit of mystery can make the difference between life and death. The ghost sniper had disappeared, but his impact would never be forgotten. As the team returned to their routines, each SEAL carried a piece of that mission with them. The memory of fear, courage, and extraordinary precision. The mountains would always hold their secrets, the ambush would always be remembered, and the ghost sniper would remain a legend, a silent protector who had turned the tide when it mattered most. Their mission had been completed, but its story would echo for years to come, a testament to bravery, skill, and the unknown forces that sometimes shape the outcome of even the deadliest battles.